let me ask you a question. When you see brokenness, maybe in your life or your family, maybe it's in your city, what do you do? Do you turn away? Do you numb yourself with distractions? Do you tell yourself it's not my responsibility, that's somebody else's to deal with? Or do you pause? Do you look again? And maybe do you ask God, what are you inviting me into? Hey, this is the story of Nehemiah. It all begins not with him in the spotlight, but with him in sorrow. It's not about his charisma, it's about his conviction. It's a story of leadership that's birthed out of prayer. It's about being tested in opposition and really anchored in purpose. And that makes this story so powerful. You see, Nehemiah's story isn't just about rebuilding walls. It's about how he did it. It's through presence and through prayer. It's through perseverance. So this book invites us to ask, God, what are you inviting me to rebuild? See, Nehemiah wasn't a prophet or a priest. He was the cupbearer. That meant he had a government job in the palace of King Artaxerxes during 445 BC. This was during the reign of the Persian Empire, and he was living in comfort, but he was far away from his land, which is Jerusalem. Yet, when he hears that the city was in ruin, that Jerusalem's walls were broken down, it breaks his heart. And he doesn't say, hey, that's not my problem. He doesn't say somebody else will get to it. What he actually says is, when I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. For some days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed before God of heaven. See, he prays, he weeps, he fasts. He chooses to enter into pain instead of avoiding it. And his leadership begins right there. And it was his proximity not to influence that changed everything. It was his proximity to the pain of his people and to the presence of his God. So at this point in the story, the people of God have returned, but their identity is still fractured. Their worship is still fragile and their hope is fading. But then Nehemiah steps in, not as a hero, but as a servant. He's there to help them remember who they are. See, this story reveals God's covenant faithfulness, his desire to restore what sin had broken, his invitation for ordinary people to step in and work with them. It's all about restoration. It isn't just possible, it's all part of God's plan. So let's take a look at how the book's laid out. Chapter 1 to chapter 2 is all about Nehemiah's burden and the bold ask that he had of the king. See, Nehemiah hears of the news of Jerusalem's condition and he breaks. And he mourns and he fasts and he prays. And then when he gets in front of the king and the king asks him what's wrong, he doesn't just freeze up. He offers a silent prayer before God and then he speaks. He shares what's on his heart. And through that conversation, God grants him favor and he receives permission and provision and protection for where he's going next, which is straight into the heart of the problem. And so courage is born in that quiet place of prayer. Chapters 3 through 7 is all about rebuilding in the middle of resistance. See, Nehemiah shows up in the city and he starts to survey the damage. He walks around it and then he rallies his people. Each one of them are brought into this rebuilding work that God was doing. The families start to rebuild the wall that are right in front of them. Now, the enemies come and they start to mock and they start to threaten and they start to conspire together, but Nehemiah helps his people stay focused. He says, the God of heaven will give us success. See, the people work shoulder to shoulder with a tool in one hand and a sword in the other. And in 52 days, the entire wall was rebuilt, not by might, but by unity, prayer, and their persistence. Then you get into chapters 8 through 10. This is all about a spiritual renewal. Remember, this book isn't just about rebuilding a wall. It's about rebuilding a people. So Nehemiah gathers the people together. And then Ezra, a priest, he reads out loud the entire book of the law as the people stand before him. They're there for hours. And as they listen to the word being spoken over them, they begin to weep. Not out of shame, but because they recognize God's mercy. And in their mourning, their joy is restored. See, Nehemiah stands before them and he tells them, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And throughout the entire nation now, confession follows. The people recount their history, they acknowledge God's faithfulness, and they return to their covenant. Now at the end, in chapters 11 through 13, the people return to the city. Worship is restored, Choirs start to walk around the walls that have been rebuilt, and they're singing praises so loud that it's heard throughout the entire land. But Nehemiah, once the work is done and the city's been restored and the people have been put back in place, he goes back to his job. He shows back in Persia, and when he walks back in, he realizes that the temple is being misused, that the Sabbath is being violated. And what does Nehemiah do? Well, he doesn't give up. He restores order, he calls people back, and the book doesn't end in triumph, but it ends with a simple prayer. See, Nehemiah prays, "Remember me with favor, my God." So in conclusion, Nehemiah wasn't the most qualified, but he was the most available. He responded to the brokenness, not with despair, but with prayer, not with blame, but with boldness. So what about you? Where are the broken places in your life, in your city, in your relationships? Maybe God is still in the business of rebuilding, of restoring, and maybe he's inviting you to be a part of it. Let's be like Nehemiah and rally the people and say, "Come, let us rebuild."